Hello everybody, welcome to Bitcoin Not Crypto. You can find me on X and Nostr at Forest Hodl. And if you wanted to book a one-on-one Bitcoin consult with me to cover some Bitcoin basics or anything you might need help with, you can do so in the link in the description. In today's video, I wanted to talk about something that just happened, which is GameStop has announced that they can now buy Bitcoin. Now, I'm going to get into a lot of different aspects of this. I'm going to cover it as much as I can. We're going to look at their reports that they just announced and what this might mean for Bitcoin, what this might mean for GameStop, and some different options that they could do in the future to buy Bitcoin. Now, this is quite an interesting development. This has been something that people have speculated for some time, especially since Ryan Cohen posted a photo on February 7th of him and Michael Saylor, the top G at MSTR, and he followed two other people besides GameStop, which is Bitcoin Magazine and at Bitcoin. We started to speculate, okay, he is contemplating Bitcoin. I mean, he's always a bit cryptic with his stuff, which is part of, I think, the lore and the speculation and the frenzy that happens with that stock, which we'll also get into a little bit here. So first off, let's take a look at this first announcement. GameStop announces update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. On March 25th, 2025, GameStop today announced that its board has unanimously approved an update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. Now, what's interesting about this was posted as its own latest news, but before that, we can actually see GameStop reports its entire fourth quarter and fiscal year 2024 results, so it's Q4 earnings, and in that is the actual legalese of them being able to buy Bitcoin. So let's take a look at that. This is in the cautionary statement regarding forward-looking statements and safe harbor, I believe is where it is. I'm just going to do Control F and look for Bitcoin. And it is, yes, it is in there. So what we can see here is the company's investment policy permits investments in certain cryptocurrency assets, including Bitcoin and US dollar denominated stablecoins. And if the company acquires Bitcoin, the company will be exposed to certain risks associated with Bitcoin, etc. So that's what's in here. Now, this fourth quarter is quite interesting for GameStop. And let's look at the overview before I talk about how much Bitcoin they could possibly buy here. You can actually see that their net income for the fourth quarter was 131 million compared to prior years of 63. And their cash and cash equivalents and marketable securities were 4.775 billion at the close of the quarter. Another point that I wanted to mention here is they completed divestiture, which means they've sold their Italy branch and the wind down of store operations in Germany. So they've closed operations in Germany, they've sold operations in Italy. So you can tell this is not a company that their current business model and their historical business model of storefronts and game sales is something that they are wanting to continue to do. They're going to try to lower costs, cut expenses, cut unprofitable sectors of that business, maintain their profitable sectors, and they're looking for a way out. This is what Strategy was doing as well when they bought Bitcoin. They were what Saylor talked about as a zombie company, as a company that is moving but not necessarily alive, right? That's what this company is, and that's why this company was incredibly heavily shorted in I think it was 2020 was basically, or it was during all the lockdowns that the GameStop frenzy went on. And basically a little summary of that was that there were more short shares outstanding than actual shares available. So with that there was this thesis by Roaring Kitty that if enough people bought the stock and drove the price up, that it would start to cause shorts to close their positions and to buy back shares, adding to buying pressure and create something called a short squeeze. And actually one of my first videos on this channel was about the GME short squeeze and how basically something like Bitcoin is much better suited for a short squeeze and for a gamma squeeze as well with something like strategy, because the underlying can't be diluted. You cannot create more Bitcoin. As much as you would want to, you cannot. What happened with the short squeeze with GME was as the price, so the short squeeze happened, right? The share price went from something really low to quite a bit higher. If we look at, so share price was around $1, roughly around $1, and it spiked all the way up to this massive spike of $120. Now this is all adjusted for share splits and things like that. And you can see it's kind of gone down ever since, but it's stayed quite a bit higher than its close to bankruptcy pricing. And that's because of continued retail interest and volatility for traders that can use this, and more speculation, which has elevated the price for this long duration of time since this short squeeze happened. So they still have a large sector of people interested in this stock, is basically what this was showing. Back here, you can see the amount of volume. There was little to no interest in this stock. Now there's an incredible amount of interest comparatively in this stock. And what else happened, and the subject of my previous video about GME, was as this stock goes up, the board members and the company itself has an obligation to the shareholders, and basically it was in their best interest to dilute, which would be raise more capital by issuing more shares, right? There's a huge demand for shares, and that's what's causing this massive price appreciation. And GME is able to just issue new shares. Like, they have to get approved and all that, but they did that, and they were able to issue a lot of shares and raise a lot of cash. And they raised billions of dollars of cash from doing so. And with that cash, they've been for years now trying to figure out what to do. They've tried different things. They've just basically floated on and floated by, and they're still moving, but they're not necessarily alive, right? They're the perfect zombie company. Plus, they have this addition of the frenzy retail traders and holders, and the meme. They're a meme stock, right? So they have this idea behind them that is incredibly volatile, right? So their options market is probably off the chain for liquidity and for trading and all of this, which is part of Strategy's value proposition as well, because they've been able to issue so many products that have some sort of convertibility in them because of how volatile their stock is, because of their connection to Bitcoin. So if GME does what they say they're going to do and buy Bitcoin, they not only raised a ton of cash to do so, but they have the volatility underlying them to do similar strategies to what Strategy has done, and they can acquire more cash through these different instruments that they can issue, maybe debt instruments or whatever, and they can buy even more Bitcoin, increasing the volatility, increasing their connection to Bitcoin, and they could really compete for a share of the interest in Bitcoin connected derivatives or instruments that follow Bitcoin to some respect. So let's actually take a look at their balance sheet here. So February 1st, 2025, they actually had $4,757 million in cash and cash equivalents. So that's a huge amount of Bitcoin if we convert that into Bitcoin. Obviously, that would drive the price up, but I can do a little quick math and show you that. It's also good to note here that their cash flow for this quarter here was 131 million. So that's probably, a lot of that is probably from selling stuff like, their Italy stores. I'm not 100% sure how incredibly profitable their business is, but you can see they are generating cash somehow. So that cash as well could go into Bitcoin to some degree as well. And throughout the future, it could continue to do that. So I did some rough math here with Grok. Bitcoin price being 90K, which is higher than it is now. It would probably probably go up even higher than that. Let's just say they were able to buy at an average price of 90,000 and they used their entire balance sheet, cash and cash equivalents. They would be able to buy 52,222 Bitcoin, making them the second largest holder of Bitcoin for a public company, beating out Marathon Digital, which is a miner that holds around 45,000 Bitcoin. So if they just yeeted all their cash into that, I mean, they would hold a huge amount of Bitcoin. Then they would increase the volatility. The price would probably rocket up. There would be a lot more demand for the stock. They could issue convertible debt and they could finance more purchases of Bitcoin. If we also look, this is an older metric here, but if we look to their debt to their balance sheet here, their liabilities, their total liabilities are only 1.44 billion. So they actually have not that much debt already. So they could increase the amount of debt if they wanted to some degree, and still with the fair value accounting now use the Bitcoin as their treasury reserve, and that would be shown as a positive on their balance sheet. Now, of course, you can speculate. I don't expect them to fully port into Bitcoin with the entire cash and cash equivalents, but they could do a percentage of that. So we could say, you know, if they did 10% of it, you know, what's 10% of 52,000? It's 5,200, right? So that's still quite a lot of Bitcoin. That's going to get them into those other passive ETFs that the qualification is more than 1,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. They could get into those. That increases the passive flows into GME. It's really going to be interesting to see throughout the next few days, weeks, months, what GME does and how the Roaring Kitty scene, the people that follow him, how this progresses. Will he post about it? When he does post about it, although there is diminishing returns now with him having gone away so long and then he came back and it was kind of weird. We saw a large spike when he did, and then another spike when he did again. We see this upwards trend from this low that we've seen. It's broken the trend line, but it's still continuing in this way overall. Maybe this will overnight push the stock price up, which it already has. I mean, post what we've seen now is the overnight trading is 26.85 and it closed at 25.40. So this is their Q4 earnings has been received well. Is it only because they're going to become a Bitcoin treasury company? How much of a Bitcoin treasury company are they going to become? This is all to be seen, right? This is all speculative. This is all before the actual purchasing, but it's an interesting piece of media here to speculate on and to talk about, because in the future, I think GME will be a piece of Bitcoin's history, and it already has quite an interesting history because of the dumb money and Roaring Kitty and everything else that was in that situation. So that's about it. If you guys had any additional comments, questions about this story, YouTube is the place for that. And if you wanted to get yourself some Bitcoin, I recommend checking out Bitcoin Well. It's a non-custodial platform. So when you send them dollars, they send you Bitcoin directly to cold storage, and they have the lowest spreads and fees. They have non-KYC available in Canada. They're also available in the States. If you use my coupon code in the description, you'll get yourself some free Bitcoin on sign up. If you want to preserve your seed phrase for generations to come, I recommend checking out Stampseed and using my code BTCNotCrypto15 for 15% off their titanium seed plate and stamping kit. In my opinion, this is the most simple, best way to preserve your seed phrase. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of Bitcoin Not Crypto.